Jamie Shanks, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you having me.
Oh man, I'm really glad to have you here for so many reasons. You've got such an impressive background, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But boy, I come from Chicago, you come from Toronto, but we're here in Salt Lake City in the valley viewing those mountains in about 70-degree weather. I'm a happy camper. How about you?
Oh, this is a fantastic place. I need a home here.
Yeah, I think that makes two of us. You know, I've been doing some work with InsideSales.com for a couple of years, and I live in urban Chicago, and I spend most of my life in urban settings. Every time I come here, I feel like I've missed my life calling, you know, and I should live here or something. So I'm going on the ski trip Friday with the group. Are you going Friday?
I actually skied yesterday because I fly out tomorrow morning.
Oh, you did? Okay, well, at least you got your skiing in yesterday.
Oh, it was,
You know?
I mean, for somebody from the East Coast, it was magic, absolute magic.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to my trip on Friday. Listen, I'm really glad you're in studio with us. Thank you so much. You have an impressive background.
Oh, appreciate it.
You're welcome, both academically and professionally. And just for my viewers, I want to review your background and ask you some questions.
Sure.
You got your undergraduate in marketing at the University of Ottawa. Then you nailed that master's degree in international marketing at the University of South Australia.
Mm-hmm.
That was quite the geographic flip.
Yeah, so I'm a Canuck, and when I was in university after I graduated, I was working on the stock exchange. Didn't really love my life. And a buddy said, you want to go do your MBA? Sure. I'll go anywhere out of this job. And he said, do you want to move to Australia? Okay, I had never been there in my life, and spent 2 glorious years in Adelaide, Australia.
Awesome. All right, mate. Well, you can now I'll have to call you mate instead of dude, right? Awesome. Well, you've got all kinds of accolades that are quite impressive. You know, you're in the top 30 social salespeople in the world, according to Forbes and others. LinkedIn, the influencer campaign, If I Were 22, I think your material was at the top of that whole list, which I found fascinating, by the way.
Appreciate it.
Great work. You're welcome. You blog every day.
Mm-hmm.
I devour your blogs. I think your content is absolutely cutting edge, and I applaud you for that. And you're CEO of Sales for Life. You got a lot going on.
It's been a whirlwind.
It has been. I got a lot of questions for you about all those things, and especially Sales for Life. I want to talk to you a lot about that. But before I do, I'd like to just delve into some personal things. Do you mind if I do that?
Fire away.
All right, good. So in the whole spirit of governing principles or guiding concepts for your life, you know, I think about someone who's done such extraordinary things as yourself, and a really an exceptional background, and as I mentioned, both academically and professionally. Are there 2 or 3 things that you've really grabbed onto by way of concepts or principles that have helped guide you along the journey?
Yeah, so I started my business. I was the director of inside sales at 2 different software companies. I thought I was the bee's knees. I thought I was great. I was 30 years old, and I decided to strike out on my own and start a consulting firm. What I realized is I not only didn't have all the answers, I had very little answers. So one of the guiding principles that I've learned the hard way is that I used to pull. I used to basically ask, but I wouldn't give. And one of the guiding principles to our business has absolutely been is we give, and I mean it's the Gary Vaynerchuk, jab, 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 right hook.
Yeah.
We just keep jabbing. We just keep helping. So one of the guiding principles is we help with no immediacy of return on investment. The other guiding principle is that people want to know more about ourselves and our knowledge, and we find vehicles of sharing that: video, blogs, infographics. Webinars. Content marketing makes up 50% of the revenue to my business.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, as a guiding principle, we never stop the marketing machine. And then I guess the third guiding principle, and I've learned the hard way as well, at one point in 2011, I stopped prospecting because I had an abundance of clients at the time.
Yes.
And that came to a screeching halt and almost bankrupted me.
Oh, wow.
And I learned that machine can never stop. Yeah.
Wow. It's very well stated. I have a real passion for many of the things that you just described, prospecting certainly being one of them, and another one that you said earlier at the top of your sequence a moment ago about, you know, the having learned to give and give and give. And it really reminds me of some lyrics from my friend Bono of U2, and that song that's wildly popular, you know, where he screams with passion, and you give, and you give, and you give yourself away, and you give, and you give, and you give yourself away. So I love that philosophy, and I think it maps with best practices not only in business but also in culture and in life. Thank you for sharing that. Hey, I'd like to ask you another question. You look back over, sort of your career and the things you've done, and we're going to get to Sales for Life in a minute. But are there 3 or 4 people that, 2, 3 people that have influenced you or made an impact on you that you might say, gosh, here's, who they are, and here's the kind of influence they had on me. Could you comment on that for us?
Yeah, so we'll start with the non-business one. For sure, it's the family, right? There's no question. I had parents that, my parents were government employees, so entrepreneurialism wasn't for them, but they encouraged me to try anything, right? And on that family side, my wife. I mean, my business wouldn't exist without my wife, because I went through 2 or 3 years of terrible onboarding and starting of a business. So without her financial backing, it wouldn't exist. On the business side, when I started this business, there were basically 2 major mentors. There was Ken Kraig, and Trish Bertuzzi.
Yes.
Who I sucked every piece of juice out of their brain I could. Learned a ton. And from a thinking bigger and scaling a business, I admire and I watch Grant Cardone all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a cultural thing as a Canadian, but I can't even wrap my head around how big this guy thinks.
Yeah.
And so for myself, I am constantly in awe of what this guy does, and think, I have to think bigger. I have to think bigger. So those would be the influencers of my life.
Wow. Well, we're on the same page there. I subscribe to everything Grant Cardone does, and just love his material. And turns out both Ken Kraig and Trish Bertuzzi are going to be on the show a little bit later today. So we got a lot of things in common there, Jamie. Thanks for sharing that. Let's talk about Sales for Life for a moment.
Sure.
Tell us about your journey. Tell us about however you want to play it. Tell us what you do now and the things you'd like our viewers to be aware of. Tell us about the journey. Give us a little insight into it.
Yeah, the journey is an interesting one. So, as I mentioned, January 1st, 2010, I struck out on my own and I started a consulting firm. For the first 2 years, I was the champion of all things, master of nothing. And I didn't really have a wrapper around a great service that I could help people with. I helped with cold calling and sales 2.0. And my business was falling apart because a major client of ours got caught with fraud and embezzlement. So that was 3 days before my wedding. And I'm an unsecured vendor, and I fly to Costa Rica to get married. Don't tell my wife. Fly to Paris for our honeymoon, and she's a bottle service and just blowing the bank account on the Champs-Élysées. And I realized when I get home, we're dead. Like, there's nothing left. And so in the summer of 2011, I would sit around staring at my computer at 3 in the morning. And if anybody's ever experienced white-hot fear, that is the fear if somebody almost held a gun to your head.
Yeah.
That's the fear that I had, that we are going to go down like a sinking ship. And I would sit there and stare at LinkedIn and try to figure out ways that I could replicate traditional selling via phone and email through this medium. And I started to invent a methodology and a process around social. And so now fast forward to 2015, we've now built the world's largest social selling training curriculum, and hundreds of clients and 50 or 60,000 sales reps we've trained. And it has become a de facto standard for early adopting companies, because social is so early. It is the de facto standard curriculum for learning social selling.
Oh, that's fascinating. And how for my viewers out there who might be interested in that, is this an online subscription service, or is this a consulting professional service?
100%. So if you're a solo sales professional, we have a public enrollment forum where you're in a classroom setting with sales reps from any company around the world. Okay. And it is called blended learning. So you're learning with a live virtual instructor. So you do it from your own home. Okay. But at the same time, there's an e-learning portal that is helping you learn the curriculum. Yeah. And we throw in other services like mentored learning and other technology, but we've created an ecosystem to take a sales rep from zero to hero socially.
Oh, fantastic! I love that. And so, what can we expect for the future with Sales for Life? What's coming on?
Well, this
Good.
future, and I come back to thinking bigger, and then I'll hang out with Ken Kroeg, and I think I just don't think big enough.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
The BHAG for us
Yeah.
is going to be to create an ecosystem for people, process, and technology around social.
Yeah.
And that will be partnering with companies that provide great services and solutions, for
Yeah.
us being the curriculum baseline for the world.
Yes.
Yeah, we want to own the topic of
Yeah.
social selling.
Yeah. Neat. That's awesome. Well, I think you're clearly on the path.
I'm
to
on
do that.
I'm on the path. I'm in first gear. But
I think maybe you're in second or third gear and selling yourself a little bit short there, brother. I read your stuff and watch you speak and listen to you now, and wow. Well, let me ask you this, man. There's another question I like to ask guests, and accomplished a lot, and you've been very transparent about some ups and downs along the way. And in part, you've answered it a little bit already, but just for grins, I'll ask it again. When you think about having accomplished so much, and especially a lot of the accolades and et cetera, this whole concept of lessons learned is an important concept, I think, for all of us as human beings. And when you look back over the course of your life professionally, in a transparent way, any lessons learned that you might want to share for the viewers?
yeah, too. I started a business in the wrong context. I started a business because I didn't want to be an employee anymore. But I didn't have a product or service that was baked out, a game plan. I wasn't financially sound and prepared for entrepreneurialism. And now knowing how difficult it is to go from $0 to $1 million, your
Yeah.
first $1 million.
Yeah.
If somebody had told me how hard that was going to be,
Yeah,
I would have been a
exactly.
lot better prepared.
Yeah.
So lesson one is, and for anybody who works at an organization that is thinking of starting a business, you can work your business behind the scenes. Leverage your existing day job
Yeah, that's
to help
right.
fund this future business.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. I quit cold turkey. That was lesson one. Then lesson two was, never take constant business development for granted.
Yeah.
And no matter how successful our business has become, I wake up every day in a cold sweat. And I hope that I never lose that passion, that I am scared out of my mind that next week the business won't exist because somebody will come and wipe it out.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because I've experienced, as my business partner calls it, the devil's butthole, as in you have seen the worst of the worst. Since
Yeah.
I've seen that,
Yeah.
I never want to go backwards.
Yeah, well, that's very well stated, and that's quite wise, and I think that's probably a great piece of advice for anybody out there who's contemplating entrepreneurialism. And I can relate to some of your stories there, Jamie. Let me tell you. Just a final question here before we close. A lot of our viewers are here at Kraig KleemanTV are young. They're just early in their career, first, second job. In sales, they've carved out sales as their profession, and they're just getting started. Any advice that you might have for young sellers and who've carved this out as their profession of choice? Anything you might say to them?
Biggest life-changing moment for myself was the day that I realized in my late 20s I didn't have all the answers. And just because you've gone through internal training in your organization, you've read a couple books, does not make you an expert. The biggest shift for myself is that I've become the consummate sponge. To this, I listen to an Audibles book every week. I listen to a new book a week.
Yeah.
And the more that I've learned, the more our business has accelerated, and I've improved as a sales professional. So if this is job one or job two,
Yeah.
or job 6, and you're in your 40s or 50s, either way, you have to be willing to learn every single day. Just because you graduated university or college doesn't mean you're done.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm in love. I've read about 5 times Rick Smith's book, and I've read it 5 times. I can't quite remember the exact title, but it's sort of like the key characteristics of the most successful executives in the world. And the number one characteristic that he identifies quite well through his research is what he calls intellectual curiosity and the desire to be constantly learning. One of the things that I appreciate in my practice, in working with young people in particular, is that they tend to almost always have ears that are unplugged, eyes that are unmasked, and hands that are unbound and unchained, and always hungering and thirsting to be mentored and to be brought along. So I think just communicating that philosophy of, as you say, being a sponge and having that willingness to learn is so important, not just professionally, but in just about every phase of life. There's some real wisdom there, Jamie. Thank you so much for that.
Appreciate it.
You bet. Well, listen, I'm going to close in a moment, but before I do, I want to say thank you so much for being a part of the show. You just did a great job today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. This is fantastic.
I'll be out on the slopes on Friday. I'll be thinking about you out there, and if I take a spill or two, I might text you and say, "Hey, Jamie, I just hurt my knee. Come help me out," or something like that. Anyway, this has been a great show. Really heartwarming, really transparent. Thank you so much. You bet. Well, on behalf of Jamie Shanks, my name is Kraig Kleeman. On behalf of Kraig KleemanTV, we want to say thank you to all of our viewers, and I want to say peace, cheers, we're out.